So household debt has grown at 3 times the rate of GDP growth since about 1980. We've become a debt-saturated society. This became clear back in 2008 when we had the financial crisis. And by the way, the other thing that happened in 2008 was the price of oil spiked up to nearly $150 a barrel. And that, in effect, was the breeze that knocked over the house of cards. But why I'm talking about this is that the debt crisis has not been resolved. What we have right now is a situation where the growth in debt that has kept the economy, kept consumer spending expanding over the past 3 decades, that debt has been transferred largely from the household level to the government level. So government debt has expanded dramatically in the last few years. Deficit spending at a rate of $80 billion a month or something like that. And meanwhile, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Central Bank, and other central banks, China and European Central Bank, have all had this policy of quantitative easing, of creating tens of billions of dollars a month out of the ether with which to buy government bonds and thereby keep interest rates low and keep the economy from crashing. Because that's what the economy naturally wants to do right now as a result of falling energy return on investment and as a result of global oil production flattening. If we didn't have quantitative easing and deficit spending right now, the natural condition of the economy would be one of contraction. So this is good to be aware of, because if you want to know what's going to happen in the economy over the next few years, these are the levers you need to pay attention to. What's going on with deficit spending and with quantitative easing. Of course, deficit spending is itself highly politicized. People look at that and they say, well, we can't keep doing that. We can't pass these enormous debt burdens on the future generations. The government can't pay its way. Well, okay, there's definitely truth to that line of argument, to that sentiment. But on the other hand, what happens if we stop creating all of this play money out of thin air with which to paper over the gaping holes in the economy? Well, then we have to deal with reality. Sooner or later, we're going to have to do that. And it's going to be a very, very big change. And that's the subject of my book called The End of Growth, Adapting to Our New Economic Reality. What should we be doing right now? Well, we should be anticipating economic stagnation and contraction, making sure that as few people as possible fall off the edge of the table altogether. Make sure that there's enough to meet people's basic needs. And the only way to do that is to address the problem of economic inequality, which has grown dramatically over the past few years, especially in the United States and China. Economic inequality has increased very, very substantially. And quantitative easing feeds into that, of course, because all of the money that the Federal Reserve creates ends up with the largest investment banks and on Wall Street, which is why Wall Street looks so good right now. Record-setting stock values, while the economy, from any rational perspective, is not really doing very well at all. So I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly how all of this is going to shake out. I don't know how long the Federal Reserve is going to be able to continue quantitative easing, or if the federal government continue with its current levels of deficit spending. But if you watch those things, you'll have some sense of how fast things are changing. What should we be doing? We should be preparing for a post-growth economy. We should be preparing for a post-fossil fuel economy. It's not going to be the economy that we experienced during the 20th century and even the first few years of the 21st century. It's going to be slower. We will be less mobile. Without oil, You know, there's nothing that we have on the energy horizon. Sure, we can have electric cars, but we're not going to have electric airplanes that carry 300 people from continent to continent. It's just not going to happen. Even with a 40-fold increase in battery efficiency, the planes would be too heavy to get off the ground. You could fly them on sophisticated biofuels, but if you start looking into biofuels critically, you'll see that the energy return on energy invested is way, way lower than what is necessary to support an industrial society. So it's going to be a different world. If we develop and maintain renewable energy sources, along with intermediate technologies, things like solar hot water heating, and clotheslines, and designing our cities and our ways of life so that we don't have to get into cars in order to go shopping at the local market that features local food and products made by local artisans. If we aim for that kind of future, I think we ultimately can have a way of life that's sort of the best of worlds, the best of the pre-industrial way of life and some of the best of the industrial way of life that we've seen over the past few decades. But I don't think we're going to get there if we're not smart. If we don't start investing in renewable energy and intermediate technology. I think we're also going to need some radical climate solutions, and I don't know exactly what those are going to be. From what I've seen so far, I think our best options in carbon sequestration are going to be in soil and biomass. I'm not a big fan of geoengineering, but I think we can do a lot with storing carbon in soil by building topsoil and by planting forests. So I was hoping to talk for about half an hour, and I think it's just about half an hour right now. So maybe I've said some things that you disagree with or you have questions about, and so I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts and have a discussion.
Okay, Richard, we passed out some paper, and so if you guys have questions, you need to write it down and bring it up to me. I came up with several while you were talking. You answered several of them immediately after. So what timeline do you see for the next major oil crisis? And more importantly, to me, because I think you already addressed the timeline, what form do you think it will take? Just price spikes at the pump? You mentioned airplanes would be out of reach. Food prices spike. How will it look?
Right. Well, the future is the hardest thing to predict. And with regard to oil prices, I think it's really a fool's errand to try to predict them. Why so? Because it would appear, on the basis of a lot of things that I just said, that higher oil prices are a no-brainer. But I don't think that's necessarily true. If something happens in the financial world to cause the economy to dip, then oil prices could tank. We saw that back at the end of 2008. Remember, in September 2008, the oil price went up to close to $150. Well, by January of 2009, the global oil price was down in the 30s, $30. And now, of course, it rose back up as the economy was stabilized. But that just shows you how volatile the situation is and could be. Now, of course, if the oil price does fall substantially, back to say $30 or $40 or $50 a barrel, what will happen is that the producers of unconventional oil, like tar sands, tight oil, deep water oil, polar oil, all of this fringe stuff, they're going to pull back on investments, just as they did at the end of 2008. And so we'll actually see if the price of oil declines, we'll see rapidly falling world oil supplies. It seems contradictory and paradoxical, but it very well could happen. On the other hand, if the economy remains stabilized by quantitative easing, deficit spending, and all the rest, then I think we'll continue to see oil prices in the range of $110 to $125 a barrel.